No Canada, Chapter 4, Part 3, pages 30 to 33. Part 3, page 30. The War of 1812. In Europe, there was a war between the British and the French again. At the time, Napoleon Bonaparte was the ruler of France. In 1805, the British defeated Napoleon's fleet and took control of the Atlantic Ocean between Northern Europe and North America. The Americans were angry because the British wouldn't let them trade with France. Also, the British took men they claimed were British citizens off American ships to serve on British ships. The British also supported the Indians in their fight against the Americans. American settlers were moving into Indian territory west of the Appalachian Mountains. To solve their problems with the British, the Americans decided to invade Canada. They thought it would be easy to conquer Canada and take the country away from England. They invaded Canada in 1812. The Americans were wrong. Canadians did not want to be part of the United States. Canadian volunteers and Aboriginals, led by Chief Tecumseh, joined with the British soldiers to defeat the American invaders. In 1812, Major General Sir Isaac Brock captured Detroit and then defeated the Americans at Queenston Heights, near Niagara Falls. He was killed in the battle. Attacks continued all along the border. There were naval battles on the Great Lakes and up the Atlantic coast. Even Canadians who were not fighting did what they could to help. Laura Secord made a 30-kilometer journey by foot in 1813 to warn of an American attack. Charles de Salisbury and his army of less than 500 French Canadians defeated 4,000 American soldiers south of Montreal in October 1813. The Americans were trying to stop shipping on the St. Lawrence River to cities in Upper and Lower Canada. The Americans burnt Government House and the Parliament buildings in York, which is now Toronto, the capital of Upper Canada. In retaliation, a group of Canadians burned down the White House in Washington in 1814. Finally, a peace treaty between the United States and Great Britain was signed in 1814. No land changed hands in the War of 1812 to 1814, but the Canada-U.S. border was established. A series of citadels and forts were built along the border to ensure that Canada would remain independent of the United States. The Americans never invaded Canada again. The rebellions of 1837 and 38, and the beginning of responsible government. After the War of 1812, Canada continued to grow. Thousands of immigrants were arriving every year. Most came from England, Ireland, or Scotland. Cities and towns were being built, and new businesses were opened. Unfortunately for the Aboriginal people, the settlers didn't think they needed help from the Indians anymore, and the settlers wanted their land. The Indians were pushed onto small reserves or farther into the north. The provinces of Upper and Lower Canada and the maritime colonies had representative governments, but they didn't have responsible governments. Canadians could elect people to represent them, to discuss their concerns and make suggestions, but all the decisions about government, laws, and taxes were still made by the Parliament in London, England. In a responsible government, the governor, still chosen by the British government, would have to appoint a cabinet that the elected representatives, assembly, chose. He couldn't just appoint his friends. The elected representatives would also be able to pass laws. Reformers in Upper and Lower Canada thought that progress towards a real democracy was too slow, and they wanted change. Some people thought that Canada should be a republic, like the United States, or even join the United States. Armed rebellions broke out near Montreal and Toronto, but the rebels didn't have enough support and were defeated by British troops. Lord Durham was sent from England to make suggestions about what could be done to stop more rebellions from happening. He suggested that Upper and Lower Canada be joined into one colony with a responsible government. The government and his cabinet would need the support of a majority of elected representatives in order to govern. Canadians would be making the final decisions. He also said that French-speaking Catholic Canadians should be assimilated into the English-speaking Protestant culture. He wanted everyone to speak English. This was not a popular idea in Quebec, where the people wanted to keep their language and culture. Upper and Lower Canada were united as the province of Canada, Canada East and Canada West, by the Act of Union 1841. But the British Parliament said no to responsible government. The governor was still in charge, only this time there was just one governor. Queen Victoria chose Ottawa as the capital of United Canada because it was on the border between Upper and Lower Canada, and it was far from the United States border. People in British North America did not stop wanting responsible government. In 1847, Nova Scotia was the first colony to succeed. In 1849, Lord Elgin introduced responsible government to United Canada, Canada East and Canada West. Sir Louis Hippolyte Lafontaine became the first leader of a responsible government. His job was similar to that of a prime minister. He was remembered because he helped to protect French rights. Lafontaine, Robert Baldwin, and Sir John A. Macdonald from Canada West, and Joseph Howe from Nova Scotia had all worked with British governors to get responsible government. Now that they had responsible government, they wanted more. They wanted Canada to become a new country separate from Great Britain. Study all of the questions on this page to prepare for the Canadian Citizenship exam and for quizzes and discussion in the next class period.